Hey, welcome to Let's Unravel, and I'm your friend Christina. So, hot take, or should I say I want your take on this question: what's better, a hot latte or an iced latte? Because I do believe there's a correct answer to this. Now, I'll let you know my take at the end of this episode, but I'd love to know your thoughts. So if you can drop a comment down below, that would be great. Let's fight it out in the comments, shall we? Thanks for stopping by. Whether you're a friend of the show or a new listener, I just wanted to say welcome. Now, we are going to be having some new advancements and exciting news coming up. An example of this is we're going to be having our first guest appearance in September, and you're not going to want to miss this episode. The best way to stay in the loop is to make sure that you follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and you're subscribed at our YouTube channel. This way, you'll get notifications anytime we release a new episode. Another great place for you to stay connected with us is also via Instagram and TikTok, where we're constantly releasing short clips from the show, and we'll be adding additional behind-the-scene footage as well. So make sure you're following us on those platforms to stay in the loop. As you find pieces of the show that resonate with you, please feel free to drop comments, whether that's on Spotify, YouTube, you name it. So without any further ado, let's jump into our favorite topic here at Let's Unravel, Win of the Week. This Win of the Week actually has to do with last week's episode, Silent Surrender. So I have been working on learning how to add graphics to the video format of this show. And so all the video format of this show is available on YouTube. And sometimes I can upload it to Spotify as well, but it usually takes about a day delay. However, I have been wanting to add a graphic for our key takeaways that have gotten rebranded to Sticky Thoughts, which are thoughts that stick. We now have a special graphic for Sticky Thoughts, and it's a graphic of sticky notes and a pen, basically writing down all of our thoughts that stick at the end of every episode. The first time you get to see that enhancement was in last week's episode, and it was just really exciting to be able to add a whole new feature to the show. Now, if you haven't listened to last week's episode, I encourage you to head over there when you're done listening here, and you should also be able to see that graphic at the end of this video if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, when you're done listening here, you can head over there. Anyways, so let's dive into our topic of the week, or should I say, let's unravel. So let's unravel niche interests. By niche interests, I mean my niche interests. So I'm super excited about this week's episode because it's all about, well, you get to know me a little bit better. And if there's one thing I'm really good at is having very obscure or random interests. And it's also so funny because anytime I ever would have a new interest, I could always tell how niche or kind of out of the blue it was based on the person I would tell. Because, you know, like you tell your mom things and it's like, oh, I love you unconditionally. It's like, you're weird, but I love you. And then you tell your sister and it's everything you do is weird to them. And then you tell your friend. And my favorite is when you tell your friends and they're like, oh, and then that's when you find the real honesty of how niche or obscure one of your interests are. So you might be wondering why I said niche interest. The reason why I said niche is, and if you're anything like me, is anytime I hear the word niche, I instantly associate it with marketing. Like it's a niche within your market. But the cool thing with niche is it actually means a specific area of expertise, interest, or marketing, like we said. So it's just more of a specific area within a broader topic. My favorite is like when you talk to someone and they say, I love to read books. And you're like, okay, what's your favorite genre? You're starting to niche it down. I love when people have such specific interests. It's not only like, I love murder mystery novels. I love when people can take it so far that they're like, I love murder mystery novels that take place in the 1920s and it's in Minnesota and the killer's the brother. And it's like, wow, I did not know it could be that specific. But that's my favorite thing. I love when people can be so specific. And there's something so magnetic about people getting genuinely excited about their interests. And the more specific they are, it's just really cool. It's like this unraveling, shall we say. So the funny thing is, over the course of the podcast, I've talked about several interests. Some of them have been like Taylor Swift, which is maybe not super niche. Maybe it was at one point in time, but it's not anymore. And then we've talked about more niche ideas like how I was obsessed with duct taping. Now, some of these interests I'm going to tell you about are more past tense. Some of them can be a little present tense. I can't tell you what my future tense obsessions are going to be, but I had contemplated naming this episode like my obsessions. And then I realized niche interests just kind of felt better. I don't know. Do you ever have moments where words just speak to you? Maybe this is just me. Maybe that's one of my specific niche interests. But there's just some words where you look at them and it's like, oh no, it feels right. In some previous episodes, I've talked about duct taping. I was obsessed with duct taping all kinds of things, but specifically, I made wallets. I made duct tape wallets, I made duct tape flowers, and then sometimes I would just do other random like duct taping ideas and just anything that really came to mind. I was obsessed with it until I was about like 14 or 15 years old and then switched into a new obsession. So going through today's episode, I'm so excited. One of my favorite obsessions that I had at one point in time that I was very passionate about is called blind items. Now, for anybody that is into pop culture, when I first started to hear about blind items, I had heard about it via TikTok, and it was this girl, and she would read these blind items. She would pull them from different websites, and it was a riddle. So for anybody that doesn't know what a blind item is, it's the Pandora box of pop culture, shall we say. And so blind items, the origins of blind items is they originated back in the early 20th century via journalism, and they were initially used for either like blackmail or social commentary. Now, the first person to be coined with this format was called William Mann. He has a middle name, but I can't pronounce it. But his name was William Mann. He was a publisher of Town Topics, which is credited with pioneering this format of popularizing blind items as a way to critique or expose social elite in New York City. So William Mann created this idea. So with blind items, what it would do, it was a riddle. Over time, you would learn who the writer was referencing based on how they described the individual. So a perfect example is like a modern day blind item. If it was going to refer to Justin Bieber, now you would need to know a couple details about Justin Bieber. You would need to know that he's Canadian, he's an A-list celebrity, and you would also need to know that he was a musician. When you would read a blind item, they would describe the person typically in the beginning, and they would also describe any others involved. So if there was going to be a blind item about Justin Bieber, a lot of times the way they would describe him would be like north of the border. So meaning what's north of our border? Canada. So north of the border, A-list musician or something like that. Or because he also grew up in the limelight, they would call him like tweener turned whatever, or former tweener. So you have all these different little details, and it's slowly refining into who this person could be about. And so blind items were tips. It would basically be stating whatever this person was doing. And so a lot of times blind items are very salacious. So it's like, oh, did you see? So Justin Bieber is married to Hailey Bieber. So it's like, oh, did you see Justin Bieber was getting cozy with someone that was not his wife? And that's where like a blind item would come in. Typically blind items were very like salacious. It's like they said, it was about blackmailing or it was about social commentary. And so sometimes you would get these nice blind items. I can't remember what they were called. There was a special name to them, but there would be like nice blind items too, where it was like, did you see Justin Bieber donated $1 million to whatever fund? So back to the origins of blind items. So blind items are really cool because anybody could write or submit a blind item, and you didn't have to do the whole riddle part. The person that was going to publish the blind item, they would do the riddle. And the reason why they would do this riddle is because there was plausible deniability that they would say, well, I never said Justin Bieber. I just described this individual. Not my fault that you line up perfectly with this person. So if you are a pop culture person, over time you started to realize, ooh, these blind items, they're not fluff pieces. They're more truthful. They're not just like whatever People magazine throws your way where there's all this PR and there's all this money exchanged and different things. Blind items were the closest thing to being truthful to what these celebrities were actually like, because the people that would send in blind items, now you have to think about these circles where if you're thinking about like Justin Bieber, and so Justin Bieber goes to a really fancy restaurant, or Taylor Swift goes to a really nice restaurant, and you don't necessarily are thinking about the people that are hearing their conversations. It could be other people at other tables, or it could be the waiters. And that was something that was so interesting, is you could have waiters that are working these really nice restaurants, hearing conversations that A-list celebrities are having. They could go submit a blind item to, and the funniest thing is blind items are still relevant to this day. To this day, blind items are being released, and they're being released by this account on Instagram called Dumois. So Dumois, and I don't know if you can tell, I'm wearing a hoodie. Let's see. I'm wearing a hoodie. It looks like I have a bunch of random letters, but it actually says Dumois on it. So I'll show you again. Yeah, that was difficult. So I'm wearing this Dumois hoodie because, like I said, a couple years ago, I had gotten really obsessed with blind items. It was really cool to go through and read all these random blind items because you got to really know some of these celebrities on a different level. It wasn't about their PR and different things like that with Dumois. And the reason why I found such an interest in this was when I was in high school, I loved to watch Gossip Girl. And Gossip Girl was basically just a TV show about these Upper East Side kids. They all went to this elite private school. All of the random students would send in tips of who like the cool people were, and Gossip Girl would report it. She would have photos and all this stuff. But when I had found Dumois, it actually reminded me of like a real life Gossip Girl where these celebrities, everyone was obsessed with these celebrities, and now people are sending in their experiences. And one of my favorite things Dumois would do is they would do this thing called Sunday Spotted. It would be all of these random tips they've gotten throughout the week. And the best part about Dumois is you didn't know who she was. Now, she might have released her identity at this point because she's like written a book and she was planning on putting together like a whole series for HBO. I don't really follow blind items anymore. This was more of an obsession that I had several years ago. Like I said, I do have the Dumois hoodie because I was really into it at that point in time. But with blind items, they were really popular in the early 20th century. They died down and they had a resurgence in the 90s and early 2000s, and they would come up via websites like Crazy Days and Night and Lainey Gossip. Now, Crazy Days and Night is a still functioning website. It's completely like outdated as far as the way the website is set up, but it's still super interesting. One of my favorite things about Crazy Days and Nights is it would give you the blind, and at some point in time, it would also give you the answer. And so if you're someone that's starting to get like interested in blind items and wanting to know how certain celebrities are described, if you go to the answer ones, or you could just type in your favorite celebrity. Like a lot of times, like I type in Taylor Swift and you could read all of the different blind items that have been revealed to be about her. And so based on who was running those websites, you could tell if this was like a puff piece or if this was like a real credible source. And what's interesting is as you read blind items, you will start to notice with certain celebrities, a lot of them are repeating themselves. And that's where you're just getting the most truest version of that celebrity because you can't hide behind PR. And then you also get to see which celebrities have the best PR. Anyways, so you could follow along with Dumois. You can follow her on Instagram. I think she still does Sunday Spotted, which was always my favorite. And so following Dumois and following blind items was such a niche interest that I had. I didn't know anybody that actually knew about blind items. Like I loved the friends that didn't care about pop culture and I would just explain what these were and they thought like I had 3 heads. But there was nothing funnier when I was working at a startup, and a lot of us were on so many meetings throughout the day, and a lot of times it's like the same people and just different things like that. So the culture, the company was like, you could wear a hoodie on a meeting. Nobody really cares. I was wearing my Dumois hoodie for a meeting, and I remember I was talking to one of my coworkers, and before we had kicked off the meeting, the coworker goes, oh my God, you're wearing a Dumois hoodie. And when someone can recognize one of your niche interests, that is so cool. Like it was talk about feeling seen, heard, and understood. There was just no better feeling. And this is why I wanted to do this episode, was because there's so many interests that people can have that are so unique. And what's so cool is when you talk to people, it can sometimes unlock a new interest for yourself. I believe I've talked about this in other episodes in case I haven't. So in every episode, I always say, this is my favorite movie. But if I was like gun to my head, need to know what my favorite movie is, without a shadow of a doubt, my all-time favorite movie is, and I will claim it, is Back to the Future. Back to the Future is so much more than just a movie to me. It is everything. And I was obsessed with this movie since the time I was like 8 years old. I was obsessed with this movie. I mean, it was my favorite movie by the time I was like 8 years old. That might have been like the first time I fully recognized this was in fact my favorite movie. It is actually the reason why I wanted to get into film production, because I remember watching it and just having all these emotions at 8 years old. Like, this is such a cool story, and just the theatrics behind it. It just was a classic. And then as I had gotten older and I'd seen it, and also I love Michael J. Fox. I think like everything about that movie is a masterpiece in my mind. You could tell me it's the world's worst movie, I wouldn't even care, because to me it's a masterpiece. And somewhere along the way, I had become obsessed with this idea of wanting to get the Back to the Future soundtrack on vinyl. Now, when I was in high school, this is back like 2013, 2014, give or take. Like I was a junior, senior in high school. school, I had wanted a record player. And this was just when record players were starting to get popular again. So I'd gotten a record player. By the time I graduated high school, I was about 19 at this point. And I remember someone saying online how difficult it was to get the Back to the Future soundtrack on vinyl. And because I had a record player, I was like, oh my God, I need to have the Back to the Future vinyl. And if there's anything that you need to know about me is I love a treasure hunt. It is my absolute favorite thing. You give me a quest to find something, that is my love language. I just love to be on the lookout for something. This could also be why I enjoy the movie Serendipity so much, because the leading lady in Serendipity, she gets a $5 bill. She writes her phone number on it because this is after the leading man has begged for her phone number because they're like, it's divine that we met, divine. And so she gets this $5 bill, puts her phone number on it, and then she goes and buys gum and exchanges it with the cashier. And so basically this $5 is put out into the world. And she goes, if it's meant to be, if it's serendipitous, you will find this $5 with my phone number on it. And then of course it's like, well, that's not fair, whatever. So then next thing you know, there's two $5 bills, one with his number on it and one with her number on it. And it's constantly floating around in the world, New York City, wherever. And that's where you see throughout this whole movie, these two characters, time goes on X amount of years, but they're on this like silent scavenger hunt of they want to find this $5 bill. When I watched that movie for the first time, I remember thinking like, oh, a scavenger hunt. I love it. And so it's the same thing. So with the Back to the Future vinyl, by the time I realized it was so hard to find, and that was a challenge, and I had to accept the challenge. So next thing I knew, I was going to all kinds of record stores like around Connecticut. And at the time, the record stores weren't super popular. You had some around, but I feel like there's like record store pop-ups all the time now. So at this point in time, I had gone to a bunch in Connecticut. I remember talking to the owners at the stores and they'd say, oh, I'm going to go to, they'd have like meetups or conventions or something. And some of them would be like, okay, like if I happen to find one, I'll buy it and I'll give you a call. Well, I never got a call. Finally, I went to a record store in Massachusetts. I talked to an owner there and he goes, oh yeah, no, he goes, those vinyls are super hard to come by. So of course, it's one of those things, didn't find the vinyl. I can't even say I felt defeated about it. It was just more the like, oh, I just would love to find this. And I remember there was one day where I'm based in Connecticut. And so we didn't have a ton of cool coffee shops around about 10 years ago. Now we have a million of them and I love it. That's another obsession that I have. I love going to different coffee shops or cafes and just popping to a new one like every weekend. It's the best. So I remember one day I was feeling a little sad and I was like, you know what? I'll treat myself. I'll go to a coffee shop. So I had gone to this coffee shop that was about like 30 to like 40 minutes away from my house. And I had gone to the coffee shop and I remember driving and thinking, oh, let me stop at this Barnes & Noble because I like Barnes & Noble. We'll take a look. And I remember Barnes & Noble was just starting to add like a record section to the store. And so for the heck of it, and at this point in time, there's like maybe like 2 rows of records. There's not a lot. And so I go in and I'm like, you know what? It's the treasure hunt. I gotta look. I just gotta look. So I go to look and I'm just flipping through. And all of the sudden, out of nowhere, there it is. There is the Back to the Future vinyl that I have been searching for over the last like year or so. And of course, I can't tell you this story without showing you the vinyl because it is a prized possession of mine. So this is the Back to the Future vinyl. If you notice, I don't even have a cover for it. It's just the disc. And if you look at the back, it has the destination time, present time, just all of it. It's so cool. I just remember seeing this for the first time. I was in awe. I remember I took a picture and I sent it to my mom and she's like, I've never seen you more excited. Except for one time when I took a picture with the Taylor Swift album. She was like, those two were running neck and neck. That was a moment where it's like, I love a good treasure hunt. And then there's just nothing sweeter than actually finding the something and it being like this prized possession. Moral of the story, anytime you get to go on a treasure hunt, go on the treasure hunt. It is so much fun. And it's a story that like, it's a story for you. It's a story for people. Like that was such a cool story in my life because I remember like I was so bummed that day. And then all of a sudden I found it and like, who would have thought stopping at a Barnes & Noble? I had gone to all these record stores all over the state of Connecticut and it was at a Barnes & Noble and it must have been like used or damaged or something. And I'm not going to lie, I didn't play it because I love how pristine it looks. I probably should frame it. That's how much I love it. And so yeah, and to me, that is like one of my favorite stories. It's just being able to find it. And most people don't even care. But for me, that was like such a highlight. Now, let's talk about some middle school obsessions. And there's nothing funnier than your middle school obsessions. Now, there's just one thing I have to say about TikTok. And I remember a comedian saying this at one point where she said something like, didn't we all dance around like in our room with like hairbrushes and like sing into them? She goes, and yet now middle schoolers are doing that on TikTok and posting it. She goes, I would have been mortified to do that. But there's something about being in middle school where it's like the confidence, where you're just like, no, I'm cool. I got this. One of my middle school obsessions was Pirates of the Caribbean. And it wasn't because Pirates of the Caribbean had come out and it was a cool time for it to be an obsession. I was always late to the game on those kinds of obsessions. By the time I got into Pirates of the Caribbean, most recent movie was the third movie. And so the fourth movie didn't come out, I think, until I was like a freshman or sophomore in high school. Most recent film at the time was the third one, and that came out in like 2008 or something. And I remember by the time I was in middle school, I think it was like 2010. So it was like a year or two after it had already come out. So a lot of the excitement of it had died down. But that was when I had gotten excited and totally obsessed with Pirates of the Caribbean. I mean, my favorite line from the movie was, I got a jar of dirt. It's the second movie in the series, and Captain Jack Sparrow has gotten Davy Jones' heart, has it in a jar of dirt, and he's basically parading around saying, I got a jar of dirt, I got a jar of dirt. That was my favorite line from the movie. I love that line so much. I remember one time a friend asked me, what do you want for your birthday? And I just said, I want a jar of dirt. And being the great friend that she was, she in fact made me a jar of dirt for my birthday. And hilariously, it was one of my favorite gifts for a very long time. It was just a jar, like an old tiny little peanut butter jar cleaned out and just put dirt in it. I loved it. That was it. That was what I wanted. Now, for my poor family members during this time in my life, I had memorized monologues from the movie. I need you to understand, like, I was obsessed with Pirates of the Caribbean. And it wasn't obsessed like, ooh, I knew all kinds of things about the actors like Keira Knightley and Orlando Bloom and Johnny Depp. No. I just liked the movies. I had monologues, like Captain Jack Sparrow monologues memorized, where there was a moment in time where I remember we had come home from like a family dinner and something randomly happened and I broke out into a monologue from the movie. And I remember my parents being shocked and they were like, that's kind of funny. Like, you know, and like my brother and my sister, like, that's kind of funny too. And then what they didn't realize is because they laughed the first time, I thought it would be funny to continue to do it at any point, at any day of the week. And then finally it slowly happened where they're like, please stop. But yet those are still probably one of my fondest memories were just the Pirate of the Caribbean monologues. Let's just put it this way. When I commit to something, I commit. So there was accents, not good ones, and just all kinds of things to it. And let's just say like I was in my glory reciting these monologues, even though they desperately were like, please just stop. But once again, nobody has the confidence of a middle schooler. I remember in another episode, I had said nobody has the confidence of a 3-year-old kid wearing a Superman costume. If there was a ranking, 1, it's a 3-year-old kid in a Superman costume, number 1. Number 2, middle schooler. Whatever the cool thing is that they think it is, they're like number 2. They're willing to go the distance. 3, the older person that has lost their filter on things and is just like, I mean, you just know it when you see it. Like my grandma or something where you would say like, you can't do that, grandma. And they're like, I don't care. I'm doing it anyways. And you're like, I aspire to that kind of confidence. That's my tier system. 1, it's the Superman kid. 2, it's the middle schooler who has no shame. And 3, it's the grandparent that's just like, I'm gonna do it anyways. Love it. That is my ranking system. I should have called this my obsession eras if I was going to break this show up. So my next obsession era, this was like COVID quarantine obsession. This obsession was cooking. I just fell in love with cooking. I had done cooking prior to COVID and meal prep and different things like that. This was like I fell in love with the art of cooking. And it was funny because when COVID had happened, I had taken 1 week of vacation off. And just as I was supposed to come back to my store, because I was supervisor at the time, I got a call from the manager saying, hey, we're actually shutting down due to COVID. So I had been on vacation for 1 week, which I couldn't even go anywhere because COVID, like the rules had already taken place. Then COVID happened. happened. So I couldn't go back to work. And so after like the first like 2 or 3 weeks of like COVID, there being like nothing to do and I had like unwind and all this stuff, I'm kind of bored. What can I do? I decided cooking. Cooking was what I was going to do because one, I loved to eat, and two, I wanted to make the things I loved to eat. The funniest thing is my Instagram reflects this. So if you go to my Instagram account, I think I have like 3 or 4 photos where I made croissants. I had moved to pasta. I made lots of bread, and then I made donuts. And so there was just like all these different things. And then finally I started to realize I'm like, nobody wants to see all of the food that I'm making. So then I stopped posting, but I would cook like every single day. Like it was a production. I cooked for about like 8 hours a day. And I mean, I had a blast though. Where I learned to cook. Now, if you've been on Facebook and you've seen the food like recipe videos, and this is like 2020. So the food recipe videos at this point in time, they were the Tasty videos. And so Tasty has a whole YouTube channel, and the Tasty videos were cool because they would either be like really simple meals, they'd be really adventurous or challenges or whatever. And so I had watched all of these Tasty videos. I taught myself how to cook, and then I started to find chefs via the Tasty like YouTube channel, and then I would just start following them and seeing like what their recipes were. The first thing that I had ever committed to actually trying to make was croissant. Now, if you've never made croissants before, my context for croissants at this point in my life was crescent rolls. You know, the ones that come in a tube and you bang it on the counter and then you just like roll them up and you throw them in the oven. That was my context for croissants. And now if you understand how croissants are made, you could see where I went foolishly wrong. I'd watched all these videos on how to make croissants, and I didn't know I needed a sheet of butter. And so I had to make my own sheet of butter. And that was how the whole expedition started, was I had to make my own sheet of butter. I didn't realize how many layers there was. And so next thing I knew, it was like every 4 hours I was folding and rolling and folding and rolling. And then finally, and at this point in time, I'm seeing these beautiful photos of croissants. Beautiful. I mean, think like you go to a coffee shop and these croissants are decadent and they're fluffy and they're big, and you break them in half, and the inside of a croissant, it's called a honeycomb. That the look of it is like a honeycomb. Kid you not. I spent like 8 to 12 hours making croissants. Now, granted, was the time broken up between like folding and rolling and you have to wait like 4 hours at a time? Yes, it was. But by the time I baked them and I pulled them out of the oven and I cut them in half because I was so excited to see the honeycomb inside, my croissants did not have a honeycomb, and I was devastated. And to that day, I've sworn to never make croissants again, which that's not even true. But I was devastated when the croissants came out of the oven. I cut them open. There was no honeycomb inside. And it's just like, this is the worst. It wasn't perfect on my first attempt. And which is so stupid because when I went to Paris back in March of this year and I'd gotten my first Paris croissant, I remember breaking it open being like, I want to see the honeycomb inside, like the way it's meant to be, which I'd had a croissant before, like a real croissant from other places. But you know, when you're in Paris, there's nothing like a croissant in Paris. And so I break it open and there was the honeycomb inside. And I was like, this is what I've waited my whole life to see. And I just need to let you know right now. So I never knew this. Fun fact about croissants. So crescent rolls, when you make crescent rolls, they're kind of like that half moon shape, like a crescent moon. There we go. Crescent moon. That's why they're called that. But like legitimate croissants like people that live in Paris would eat, they're not shaped like a crescent moon. They're actually supposed to be straight. And I always used to wonder when I would go to really nice coffee shops and they'd have these beautiful croissants. I was like, why are they so like perfectly like straight? And they actually say it's because of the butter. If you have a high quality butter, that allows the croissant to keep the correct form of it being straight. It's like a high quality croissant. If you want to know where I learned that from, TikTok. I'm sorry. TikTok is my wealth of knowledge. Has TikTok become my new Google? Maybe. I'm a visual person. I like videos. It's more entertaining. Even though, have you seen the new AI version of Google? I love it. You ask a question and it gives you like this AI answer. I don't have to try to guess which website to go to find my problem. I'm sorry. That was a side rant. I was too passionate about Google. Anyways, moving into my other topics. Now, after talking about just some of those hobbies, every time you get involved into a new hobby, I think it's really exciting to unlock a new part of yourself because you're finding yourself on these journeys. Then when you get to share those interests with friends and family, or maybe it's like a stranger and then the stranger becomes a friend, that's the really unique part about having unique interests and having niche interests, because the more specific, the more unique they are, it's a getting to know yourself on a different kind of level. And what I've started to notice is the more interesting or unique kind of like obsessions I start to have or hobbies I start to have, you slowly can build upon them in different ways. So like a perfect example is I love journals. I love journals. I mean, I go traveling. A lot of times I buy journals from different places. So when I had gone to Europe back at the end of February, beginning of March, I bought so many journals because I love journals. But my favorite journal that I bought while I was in Paris there was this journal place in Paris called Louis Carmen. And so Louis Carmen is a leather journal store, but it's fully customizable. So you make your own leather journals. Now, for any of you who are watching on YouTube, you can see I'm holding up a leather journal next to me. This is the leather journal that I actually fully customize. What's so cool is you get to start by picking out the size of your journal, and inside you have little booklets. And so I have 2 booklets here. That's the size I had gotten. And then I have a really cool pocket holder. With this journal, one of my favorite things is just being able to customize everything. And I mean, you picked out absolutely everything. It was everything from the size, the color of the leather. It was from the rubber of the band, the little stone that you have at the front. And one of my favorite things is you could add charms to it. So on the side, there's charms. And I had gotten 2 charms. I had gotten one of the Eiffel Tower and then one of like a movie camera. You can have your journal monogrammed. And so I had gotten my name monogrammed on the journal as well. And so for me, going to Paris and getting to create a leather journal, it was such a unique experience. And then it was cool because you got to see so many other people. I mean, we were in a line just to get into the store to create one of these leather journals, but it's one of the coolest keepsakes you can have. And then it's great because it ages so well. But this goes back to having interests. It's so cool to see how you might feel as though you're like the only person in the world that it's like, am I the only person that would actually want to make my own journal? And then you go to a store and you see so many other people that have that exact same interest. Then you have these moments where your interests and different obsessions start to build upon each other. I had loved duct taping when I was in middle school, when I was 16, and I had loved journals, but I'd gotten so sick of everybody having the same kind of journals, and I wanted something really unique and I wanted something different. And all of a sudden I had gotten this idea that I was going to make my own journals. And so what I used to do is I would go to like Target or Walmart. I would buy a composition notebook. When I was going to school, I used to have to put brown paper bags on all of my hardcover books to protect the covers. And so what I would do is when I had gotten these composition notebooks, I would get them and I'd actually wrap them in like a brown paper bag, or sometimes if I went to like American Eagle, they'd have like a white paper bag. Then I would wrap it around this composition notebook. What would happen is I could fully design the cover of these notebooks. So of course, I have an example right here. This is a notebook that I had in 2016. So I think I was like 17 at the time. And I had taken a white bag from like American Eagle, wrapped this composition notebook, and then I would pull the pictures that I wanted from like Pinterest. I created my own title for the notebook, and it was fully my design. It was something I wanted to do. And if I had never done any kind of duct taping, I don't know if I would have had the ability to really create that journal in the way that I had. But that goes back to because of having loved journals so much and wanting to have a really unique way of remembering certain years. Like when I was in high school, I had started doing this thing where every single year I would make a new journal that was specific to that year. I had started making those journals in like 2014. And then every year since, I would continue to make those journals. So anytime I had ideas, I'd write them down, any life events. Nowadays, TikTok calls it a junk journal. So basically, I was doing the junk journal thing before it was even a thing. And that was where I kept all of my mementos, like movie tickets and concert tickets and whatever things you could possibly fit in a notebook. And I just give it a fancy title for the year. So now I just have to say thank you so much for humoring me as I've talked about some of my favorite obsessions. Now I could have so many episodes talking about some of my obsessions. So if this was an episode that you really liked, I would love for you to give this a big thumbs up. Please drop a comment down below saying do a part 2, because then this way I'm happy to tell you all of the weird obsessions that I've loved to have. And it's funny because I don't know if I'd say this was an obsession, but like one of my favorite times of year, I love March Madness. Now, I'm not a big sports person. I can appreciate it. Like, I don't mind going to like a hockey game. Honestly, I love winter sports. Those are like my favorite. And I love the Olympics too. The point is March Madness. March Madness is always one of my favorite times of year because there's a March Madness pool you can go in where you do the March Madness brackets for basketball. And there's nothing more exciting than being so invested into your bracket and then being in a pool with other people. So like I'm I'm in a pool with like my sister and my cousin, and it's so exciting. And then when you start to see my cousin won the March Madness bracket this past year, it was so cool because you always hope to win. And then when it happens, you're like, oh my God, like it's just wild. And it's even better because we're not sports people. So when all of a sudden someone that's not a sports person, and it was like, I just guessed based on color and mascot or whatever. So that was really fun to see. So my very last obsession, I know I already said thank you, but I am going to tell you one last obsession that I have. So I talk about TikTok all the time. If you can't tell, TikTok is one of my obsessions. I can't help it. The reason why I love TikTok is it's short form content. I love how people can treat that social platform as almost like their canvas for filmmaking. And so one guy that does it so well, his name is Tim. I can't pronounce his last name, but he would do these like daily vlogs or a day in my life. He worked in a corporate job. He was like a high up advertising guy. And these videos were so cool from just the point of view that he would talk, the way that he was in corporate, the way he multitasked filming everything, editing everything. I looked forward to watching his videos every single day because it was like this work of art. And then you got to see his personality in it. He was just really cool. It was just never seeing something like that before. That's where with TikTok, I always love when people can take the time to almost make this tiny little cinematic video. And you would never think that someone would like look forward to watching your video like all day long. And then all of a sudden it kind of happens and you're like, wow, getting to see the community he had built really all around just his video, especially when I was working in corporate, to see his videos and to see his daily life and be like, wow, it's possible. I mean, he woke up so early just so he could fit everything he needed, and his time blocking schedule was insane. He didn't coin Sunday Scaries, but he would write these emails to himself so that when you get like Sunday Scaries, and if you don't know what Sunday Scaries are, it's basically you get nervous the Sunday before you go back to work on Monday. And so it was Sunday Scaries. But I looked forward to watching his videos daily because they were so unique. And there would be certain repetitive things, like he ate the same type of lunch every day, but he was always upbeat, and it was so exciting to watch. Now moving into my favorite part of this whole episode is trying to sum all of this all up into one phrase. An episode in a phrase is, I would say, niche interests. It's finding a piece of yourself or unlocking a piece of yourself. So that is our episode in a phrase. I meant to say this quote when I was talking about Paris, but Audrey Hepburn used to always say, Paris is always a good idea. Anyways, so moving into our sticky thoughts that stick. So you could be thinking, what would be the thoughts that stick to this episode? Well, if there's anything that I've learned by having some niche interests, it would be this. 1, the best connections come from a common interest. So the more niche of an interest, the better. Number 2, niche interests give you a secret language to speak. I mean, prime example, look at blind items. It's such a unique language, and the more people are invested into a topic, the more interested it is. Number 3, interests provide a sense of community. And number 4, finding a piece of you. So thank you so much for hanging out with me and humoring me as I've gotten to go through some of my niche interests. I'd love to hear about some of your niche interests. So if you wouldn't mind dropping a comment below. I mean, whatever random interest you've had, I want to know about it. Please drop a comment below. And if you are interested in blind items and you want some recommendations for good podcasts to listen to, please feel free to send me a DM at Let's Unravel Pod. You can connect with us more on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Let's Unravel Pod. And if you enjoyed this week's episode or the podcast show in general, please feel free to give us a 5-star rating wherever you may listen. Also, please don't forget to hit that follow and subscribe button wherever you might listen to stay up to date on all new episodes. We release new episodes every single Thursday. And while it's that time of the episode to tell you my hot take is hot lattes are far better than iced lattes. Now, if it's 90 degrees or 100 degrees outside, I absolutely will be drinking an iced latte, but my heart lies with the hot latte. That is where I will die personally. Well, that's all. See you later. Bye.